Welcome, dear ISAN colleagues, to my Reality Wrestling Arena methodology for data presentation and analysis that I used in my PhD study. So I developed it for my PhD study, the Wrestle for a Holistic Reality Through Science and Religion, a Science Teacher's Autoethnography. For my study, I searched the ideas of science and religion for my life that had the greatest influence on me, because I wanted to try and find what it was in my background, in my past, in my environment that made me want to become a science teacher, and why, as a science teacher, I write science poetry to try and invoke an intimacy with the world for my learners. It's also my wish to try and create a personal reality, my reality, which triangulates my lived experiences, the facts and findings of science, and the scriptures from religions. The key ideas that led to the creation of the Reality Wrestling Arena, well, I was trying to create an ideal environment where, an ideal audience where I could present my study without fear or favor, and with a wish from the audience to really hear what I had to say. So I created my land, an ideal ethnographic landscape, and I used a point in history and geography that best suited my needs. Finding that was a challenge. Then I created the Reality Wrestling Arena, which was the environment within my land where I could present or perform my data in the way that I wished. But I also enabled the Reality Wrestling Arena to be a place where I could analyze my data, where I could bring in voices of verisimilitude from my lived experiences and from the literature to be a part of the performance and analysis. The literature that helped me to achieve it comes really from two sources. One was Bowles' Theatre of the Oppressed, where he recommends that to be unbiased and to liberate oneself from the kind of inner voices that we've maybe picked up from the world that we come from, to really create an environment where you can tell your story unfiltered, without fear or favor, and also without those self-editing voices that tend to get in the way of what we want to say. And so you can create an audience who want to know and who want to value and love your full truth, the full you. And that motivated me to create this land and to create the Reality Wrestling Arena. And then from Denzin's performative autoethnography, I saw that he used voices from the literature as though they were commenting directly on the events. And that really excited me to try and create a space where I could make use of both Bowles and Denzin's ideas. So I created this Reality Wrestling Arena. It's situated within my ideal ethnographic environment, my land. And on the field of engagement was where I would enact my lived experiences. And then myself as researcher, I could be in the commentary box and invite voices from the literature to give verisimilitude and so on to my study. So I'd like to give you some examples from my study of the use of it, just to give you a taste rather than describing what it was. So at the start of my data presentation, I performatively expressed how I went about shaping and creating my land. So I'll read it for you. 200 days at sea. 200 days ago, I set out in search of new land, the homeland of my reality. A scene of a vast ocean appears on the field of engagement. These are added to and changed to fit the images expressed in the speech. I have been at sea, a sea of readings and conversations and experiences. I set out in search of my new land, one that could form the ideal ethnographic foundation on which to present my autoethnographic study. I needed it before I could start writing, and I trusted that I would recognize it when I found it. For 200 days, it was mostly just ocean, never-ending meeting of shapes that kept changing, of movement, a perpetual rise and fall of storm and wind and rain, of calm and sky, of weathers that shook us right through, cleansing our gut, fighting with our survival. A reminder to hold on to the resolve that the Son of Man, the human who wishes to journey as an independent being through our inherited humanity, hath not where to lay his head. Each sighting of land lifted my heart with hope. On its shores, I would leap and run with the mind of a child. The Bible tells us this is the way to do it. tasting and smelling and looking and loving and lost in small words, captured mountain range sentences. And I wrestled with the landscape to see if it represented all the elements that my land needed. From the peaks, I experienced the land's magic vistas and limitations. Each being beautiful and rich was yet but an island and not yet my land. So back on the ocean of new readings, new names, new whole oceans of thought and experience, new hope, new trust, new faith, renewed resolve to become a son of man. Then to describe the land, again, I continued in this performative, descriptive way. This new land at first appears as the land of Goethe and Schiller's Germany. Germany at the end of the 1700s and the first half of the 1800s. It is a land where science and idealism foster a liberation from nationalism and prejudice and manifest great musical, philosophical, and literary achievements. The people of this land do not have insurance or any machines to keep them alive if they are dying. The great leaders in these communities present the clear idea that life is for learning and for developing the courage to learn from reality, even if it leads to death. They live with the acceptance that life is hard, and that this acceptance itself enables them to embrace life with less fear and less suffering. So then I'll present to you an example of me going through past experiences. This is a presentation of my data, and I did it by giving different titles for different aspects. So WW2 represents me at the age of 2. And when I write Reality Wrestler, that's the adult me reflecting or commenting on the story that's just been told. WW2 is walking with his mother and his older brothers through the streets of Edinburgh. He radiates a love that is focused on his panda bear. He takes the small stuffed toy panda everywhere with him. He offers everyone that he meets to kiss it. Kiss it. Reality Wrestler has heard this story many times over the years from his mother, who tells it with great fondness. Reality Wrestler believes that this is what he has continued to do his whole life, to offer up those things that he finds most precious in the hope that others will embrace them. He also sees in this story the earliest expression of his love for teaching. So here's a story from my teaching career as a science educator. At the age of 53, WW53 is teaching grade 8's various skills in preparation for a survival camp. He shows them computer-generated visuals of what the night sky will look like when they're on camp. The students draw the constellations of the Southern Cross and Orion's belt, which they will be using on their night orientation. On the first night of camp, a 13-year-old girl calls excitedly for WW53. She and her friend have just seen and identified the constellation of Orion and cannot believe that it actually exists. They then excitedly search for the Southern Cross and hug each other with furious joy when they locate it. They now ask WW53 for instructions on how to use the stars to find north. WW53 realizes that these students drew the diagrams in class without the notion that what they were learning was real in any sense. He is shocked to think that many students may experience the science content they learn as forever detached from their environment, from their reality. So here are 3 examples of me using voices from the literature to comment on the enacted events as part of the analysis. This is from Ruby Sales. Yes, when Reality Wrestler was talking about the train church service with workers who were on their way to serve their white masters, I felt real parallels with the black slaves on the plantations in the American South where I grew up. In America, we had a situation where black folk religion developed as a way for slaves to supersede the power of their white masters by obeying a more powerful master, our true master, God. I don't know if Reality Wrestler was racist before his train rides, but what I feel from his story is that he finds an ideal, a story that moves him to recognize a wisdom in this part of black culture that nourishes him. Something that he says he looked forward to on his way to work. And so, when the Xhosa teacher told him that God really loves him, he could really believe her. I wonder whether he would have believed what she said if he had not had such a deep exposure to the black church services on the train. And here's a comment on my near-death-like experience. Post, that's me as researcher. To comment on Reality Wrestler's near-death-like experience from his personal experiences is George Ritchie. George, what did you make of what we heard earlier? Well, there are a number of small similarities between my experiences and those of Reality Wrestler. One similarity is the experience of blindingly bright light that somehow doesn't hurt your eyes. Another is in Reality Wrestler's The World of Is, in which he describes the power of thought to enable things to happen, like his mother appearing when they thought of her. This was my experience too when traveling away from and then back to the hospital where my dead body was lying. Further, his experience in the army where the 4 men came to intimidate him and the transformation of their attitude, possibly as a result of his lack of fear and his inner interest in them, resembles in its own way what happened with Wild Bill Cody in the Nazi concentration camps, where his deliberate decision to love everyone enabled him to remain physically and mentally healthy in the face of extreme deprivation. I enjoyed listening to these stories and feel a resonant truthfulness and spirituality in them. And the final of these 3 voices from the literature, Richard Dawkins. I found the science poetry to be delightful. From now on, when people accuse science of being barren of reverence and deep personal feeling, I will just point them to works like these. But let us not think that this is the first of its kind. Charles Darwin's grandfather, Erasmus Darwin, was writing more stimulating and powerful works using scientific ideas in a style that even influenced some of the great poets of his time. Although this Reality Wrestler went in ruined with so much superstitious and fanciful nonsense. What is this The World of Is? And what is a reality? Nothing other than a tasteless soup of unclear thoughts mixed up with all kinds of romantic notions and delusions. He would do better to stick to the science poetry and leave out the rest. Reality is what we're after. Reality? Really? The audience laughs. So that's just a taste of what the potential is for creating your own reality wrestling arena. I haven't published an article yet on it. So if you wish to cite anything, please cite my thesis, my PhD thesis. The connection is there, given to you, and the methodology chapter is chapter 4. So please have a peek if this is of interest to you. Thank you very much for listening to my talk on the Reality Wrestling Arena, and please feel free to create your own. I look forward to your feedback during our session in the conference. Thank you very much.